you want to go to...
Oh, cool, that's okay.
So if you want to go to say that one, you just press chambers of that camera.
Okay.
And we go to that camera.
And then do the start recording and stuff.
I'm not sure who's recording.
Because that would be stored. Not recording.
Yes, I'm on YouTube. We'll I'd say just start a recording anyway.
Okay.
That maybe we can remove recording at a later date, but probably better to have it.
Okay.
You currently got one here, which is you.
Oh.
So it could actually get a see how you can do it on the screen.
You can go.
Let's find out.
Yeah.
See no problem.
But you need a hand just seeing something.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Hopefully
I don't think this is working either. It will not.
yeah, no, we're talking about yesterday.
Okay.
I'm ready. Are you ready?
Yep, we are. We've got this far.
Cool. Do we usually record it?
No.
Start recording?
No, we'll do the record. I'll do the recording in Teams.
Oh, okay.
So you don't need to worry about that.
Yeah, so the stream's been started, it's just on the one.
Yeah, I've got this going just to show you that.
Cool.
One day I'll learn how to do this.
I'm assuming it's very straightforward.
Oh, I was trying to figure out how we can make the Surface Hub do it, but that was getting all too technical.
You just share.
I tried to do a Teams live with him, and then push it through the Surface Hub. I thought I'd have to do this, but I couldn't make it work.
Oh no, it's not on me.
What's that?
The Surface Hub. How do you share that one?
What one are you sharing?
We're sharing. It'll have to be in the.
So we Teams live. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, is there a team?
Yeah, on the bottom of it.
Oh, cool. Okay, so share that to that.
Yeah, so because no one else is actually doing it at the moment. Yes.
Is it delayed, right? We set it up so that it's a delay. What about the sound?
So is he doing the sources? What's that?
Maybe I'll have to sit down and just start with it. I might have to borrow your fan.
Otherwise, it's just the chambers running, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's some horrible.
Not to have time and hope which is totally terrible. By the time I get up here, it's
Steve may have to go through this.
yes.
In more detail.
Yeah, in more
With a
detail.
lot of maybe.
Not just that, but you may have to go through
And
add a few things.
Oh yeah, yeah.
This computer's crashed a few times and I just had to be
So look at it, try and put it on
so it's lost a lot of the previous things that were on. So it's
can
had to
we
relook.
just quickly see this? Oh, so it does share that. Okay, so we can have green copy. Okay.
So that camera's the service hub. So we won't actually see that. But that's got like because other public's supposed to be able to see what is on the Teams meeting?
Might be split a pricing list.
Yeah, I don't think it is. It's obviously on there.
I'll let Steve know that it's not actually...
It's not a biggie. It'd be good. It looks better. That looks better.
Oh, you prefer that camera?
Yeah, I think that always looks a lot better. That one looks just like a dingy grey.
Yeah, the colour schemes are very, very nice on it. that down on here, there's no, it doesn't have a like audio source.
Oh, something different appeared there when I started.
Nah, there should be a like a audio.
It says media source. Oh, where did you just?
Oh, so that's adding something.
Oh, okay.
But we don't have. Guessing. But
Yeah, hopefully it's go down. And you were on looking at the houses.
I guess we have to make that decision. What time is this meeting? She said. Oh, so we go time to Tuesday. Okay, sweet.
But that was scheduled for 9 from the someone's rescheduled it.
And there probably will be people out there over lunch.
Well, because last time we couldn't get it to work. Somebody's here instead, wasn't it?
Hey,
So we were trying to.
but you don't give a shit about it.
And I know.
So let's go back to one. So you can swap between them.
I went like. No.
All right, councillors, we'll call the meeting to order. Welcome to the council meeting for the 28th of November, 2024. So we'll start with a karakia.
Thank you, Chair. Whakataka te hau ki te uru, whakataka te hau ki te tonga, kia makinakina ki uta, kia mataratara ki tai, e hi aka ana te atakura, he tio, he huka, he ho hu, ti hei mauri ora.
Thank you very much. All right, councillors, we've got a few items on the agenda, including two that we'll be welcoming externals on the item to do with our annual report, and then also we will have externals presenting in relation to Waikato Water Done Well update. So I'm hoping that we should be done before noon. So hopefully we can make some fairly quick progress today. We do have one item in public excluded. So we'll start with, we've got the health and safety statement. Councillors and staff will be familiar with that. I'm sure Clarence, you've probably heard it before too. So we'll take that as read. We'll move to apologies. We've got apologies for lateness from Councillor Hodge. Any other apologies to note? Got a mover in Councillor Marr, second in Councillor Hughes. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Confirmation of the agenda. The agenda is on page 3.
Happy to move.
I've got a mover in Councillor Nicol, a second in Councillor Strange. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Disclosures of interest. Any new disclosures or disclosures in relation to any agenda items today? Nope. All right. So we will move to confirm the minutes of the council meeting held on the 31st of October 2024 as a correct record. Councillor Clarkson, happy to move. Second, and Councillor Hughes. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Okay, we'll now go to confirmation and or receipt of minutes. So we're confirming the ICMC minutes from 24 October and 7 November. And we are receiving the minutes from the Tarrant WRC Co-Governance Committee, as well as the Future Proof Public Transport Subcommittee being received. I got a mover for that. Councillor Strange, and a second in Councillor Smith. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. All right, now do we need? Yes. Right, so there was a recommendation that came through the Future Proof Public Transport Subcommittee. I'll go to Councillor Strange as the Deputy Chair of that committee, if you wanted to speak to this recommendation.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just thinking back to the meeting, the intent of the resolution was to keep in step with HCC regarding investment in PT services and PT infrastructure within the city. So basically, the recommendation was that through the annual plan, given the situation with reduced NZTA funding, for their share moving forward, that we would look at retaining our local share in order to actually make some progress within the PT services within the city. However, I think in wording the resolution, we perhaps left off that we would consider it. So the intent was that we were considering it through the annual plan rather than giving clear direction. So basically, staff have recommended that we let it lie on the table and that we pick it up through the annual plan process. So, Dave, or Chair, we just let it lie on the table for now?
We can simply note the recommendation that has come through from the Future Proof Subcommittee and record an action to bring it up as part of the annual plan process when the time comes.
Mr. Chief Executive, did you want to comment?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I think that's a sensible thing to do, because I think it'd be difficult to make a decision today without you seeing what else package of the annual plan. So staff could bring this, will bring this to the workshop in early December, so it can be considered as part of it.
Yeah. So just to reconfirm that was the intent, to balance the need of affordability within our communities alongside aspirations within those same communities to actually progress public transport. So, yeah, thank you for the opportunity, Chair.
Right. So do we have to, if we're going to just note it?
We should just note it.
Okay. Right. We don't need to note it as a... Wait.
Happy to second.
I think we're just going to note it, and
Oh, yeah.
so we don't need a motion to note
Oh,
it.
okay.
We will just
It is.
record an action point to bring this back through the annual planning process. All right. All right. Now, there were some recommendations that came through from the subcommittees. How would you like to handle this?
Look, I think that the chair of the committee might like to speak to the purpose of the recommendations. And again, I think that I won't preempt it, but possible for noting, and Director Ryan might be able to talk to it if necessary.
All right. Councillor Cookson, as the chair of ICMC, did you want to give the background on this?
Yeah, so I think the members of the committee wanted to understand and clarify the position of land use and climate change to the committee, and the effect that would be to their scheme. If you want to add to that, no?
Would that look like having something presented to the next scheme committee? Is that what you're kind of?
There was a preference that I'm going to paraphrase it. Is basically that options, they were looking for a preferred option, and it was actually stated in the recommendation coming through. I don't want to misquote it. Someone, Greg, can you on page? Yeah, okay. I'll defer to.
All right.
So,
can we get
yeah.
to the page 42? Want to get everybody looking at the right words?
Want to go to the minutes of the scheme because that's where it came up. Because actually, it was a preferred.
I'm just doing this off the top of my head. So the Waikato Scheme Subcommittee made resolve for integrated catchment to look at these recommendations. One of them was for Council to clarify its position on land use. When it left the scheme subcommittee, their preference was for Council's default position on land use to be adaptation, not retreat. In the process of integrated catchment receiving those recommendations, they modified the recommendation, and obviously these recommendations now are from the integrated catchment committee, not the scheme subcommittee as such.
Yeah.
And that wording was tweaked slightly.
Could I? So, Madam Chair, I'll read it exactly. The scheme subcommittee recommends to ICM that Council clarifies their position on land use policy, in particular that climate change adaptation is the preferred option. And it was my view, and it was supported by the committee, that wasn't the position of Council. And at the very least the Council could do was just clarify its position on climate change with regards to land use policy, which I didn't see as being terribly onerous, just a 1 or 2 pager to go to them at the next meeting. And it's probably a good thing for us to do as a Council to just clarify that in a really reasonably succinct way to stop this sort of thing growing legs. Yeah.
Right. And I've found the page, so it's page 48 has got the 2 specific recommendations that have come through from the subcommittee. So the one you just were speaking to is that first one on that page, right?
Yep. And the other one there was about a mission statement, and again, that was probably going a bit further than the concept of individual committees, directorates having their own mission statements was not something the committee supported either. So we have a Council one. So again, that needs to be communicated to that committee at their next TUI.
Okay, so I thank you for speaking to the first one, because I do note that you moved that. Councillor Smith as the seconder of the second resolution on that page.
Just like, thank you for actually drilling down to I wanted to make sure I had the right words, but it was about adaptation, and the Stuart's explained the ICM didn't do that and wanted to expand it a little bit. The next one is the beach shrinkage, and they want the landowners to be involved, and I believe that is the plan anyway. So Greg's nodding his head. So it's really noting it as opposed to making a recommendation.
Do you want to?
Thank you, Madam Chair, councillors. So the business case that councillors signed off through the long-term plan process had detail on stakeholder and landowner engagement. We have undertaken that engagement with relevant stakeholders for, I think, a process of over about 6 years thus far, but it is part of the business case that engagement is a very critical part of that. So I don't see any issues with this recommendation. That engagement will be had at the appropriate times along the way of the already approved business case.
All right.
And on that third one, Madam Chair, there's been a number of issues over many, many years that integrated catchment has had with landowners in getting work done and protecting the assets. 20 odd years ago, the Central Waikato Drainage Committee recommended to Council that a bylaw be introduced. That didn't proceed through the LTP, but it's becoming quite evident and supported now by staff and the landowners on the committee, or from the subcommittee, that we look at Council initiating a bylaw. There's a number of bylaws around the country, an excellent one in the Bay of Plenty, that we could use as a model. It probably relates to a model from the New Zealand standards. So it would be a recommendation that, and I'd move it if necessary, that Council initiates work on a bylaw for flood and drainage assets to protect them.
Did you want to comment?
Yeah, no, thank you, and thank you, Councillor Smith. I just wonder, bylaw, I think, Tracy, your team would normally do that. Can you just talk about if Council we're going to support that today, can we just be aware of what any process matters we might need to take into account?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Director Ryan and I were just having a very, very quick conversation then about this. So yeah, we usually look at the refresh of any existing bylaws that we have or the development of new. We haven't developed any new bylaws. As Councillor Smith said, this was discussed some years ago, but the process the organisation went through at the time chose not to use this as a tool. For those councillors who are unaware of bylaw process, would need to go through the special consultative process of the Local Government Act. We would work pretty closely with our ICM team to understand what bylaw for. First to bring back to council that decision whether we would proceed with a bylaw or not, or do we have other means to do so. That is part of the assessment. In rough order, rough measure of costs that we're looking at for just the special consultative process, it's around, I would say, 50 to 90k. It has to go through full process with hearings and all of that. We don't presently have that program, so anything that we would need to do in that space, we bring back to council to look for reprioritisation in terms of our work programs, both in terms of staff time and cost. That is not the cost involved in just developing up the bylaw or drafting a bylaw. We'd look to obviously get some expertise across the organisation and legal expertise, and Greg might have something further to say.
Yeah, just to note that this was a matter that was put forward as part of the long-term planning process, but it was set aside, and it did acknowledge that there will be a cost involved in proceeding down this way. So I guess at the moment it is early days, and I've asked my team to start thinking about what might be involved. Obviously, as Tracy pointed out, it may require the reprioritisation of existing programs or resources.
Can I suggest, Councillor Marr, as the Chair of Strategy and Policy, that this probably sits under your realm? And so if Council is of a mind to explore this further, including all of the implications, perhaps it comes back through Strategy and Policy. So we'll note this, and we'll note an action to bring it back through.
Well,
sorry.
If I can, I want to move that we initiate work, whatever the right words are, that we consider a bylaw and ask staff to bring back an appropriate report. The reality is we also need to know what the issues are if we don't do this, because we keep getting told that we can't do things because we can't enforce it. We can't do this because we haven't got a bylaw. And the reality is you only use a bylaw when you really have to. You work with people until such time as you need a big stick. And if you haven't got a big stick, well then wasting our time.
Can I suggest that the wording there where it says initiates work, can we initiates work? How about investigates? Initiate work.
What you described before.
I'm just reflecting on the discussion from Director May around program implications of doing this, and so I would rather council make a informed decision on whether or not that they are happy with the implications that it might have, were we to initiate work on this. Did you want to say something, Director May? Oh. Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Could I suggest an amendment that says that staff are asked to bring a scoping paper back to Strategy and Policy in early 2025.
How about that?
I think the scoping paper is and I think if we add initiates, that almost jumps a little bit too far at this stage.
I agree. Okay, so we're taking out initiates work there. Did you gather what Director May was
Excuse me, Chair. Just while we're wordsmithing, I do think we need to look at developing a bylaw before we can implement one. So there's probably a little bit of word crafting that needs to be around that in terms of to express what the intent is of the committee.
However, Chris, the intent is to possibly copy and paste one from Bay of Plenty, for example. So it's not like we have to come up with it from scratch. We do have a lot of. I'm just saying, let's not overblow how much might be involved, perhaps. Or am I completely wrong with that?
But I don't know what might be involved, and so I'm wanting us to err on the cautious side before we are instructing staff to take on what may be a big piece of work, or it may not. I don't know at this stage. I don't have any information in front of me.
Like the scoping paper coming back.
Could I just add a 10 cents worth? Development, and look, I can't speak for Waikato District, but I can tell you right now that development in Waipa is softer scale in terms of pace, and the longer we postpone doing this, the more the beneficiaries of these schemes are going to be severely compromised by inappropriate development that pays no respect to what these networks were intended to do in the first place. It's happening now, and it's been happening for quite some time,
I just, the word implement here is hanging me up a little bit because it implies intent to implement, and I don't know what.
It's been well acknowledged that the current regulatory framework is not managing development in relationship to these networks. So work to implement. It's not saying to implement, work to implement.
So work, sorry, that word to crossed out.
I mean, you could. My point is, you could interpret that a million ways, but it's not locking us into doing it.
It's just
yeah, we have a note and then we have an action.
Great.
And can I, Madam Chair, as the mover of, without a second, hopefully there is one.
I'll second.
Thank you. That the subcommittee and ICM have endorsed this. It's half the council. The reality is we as councillors, like we do in life, we can change our priorities, and this ICM relates to a third of the work of this council and a hell of a lot of money within this council from landowners and other contributors. So it's important that we address the issues that have been raised for many years. So I just don't want to see an open-ended 2025. It's got 12 months in it. I want to see that report back by March or somewhere in that end of the first quarter.
Early. About early 2025.
Or prior to 30 April anyway.
Happy to discuss that with my director, Noel, and we'll get back to you.
Yeah. In terms of getting it into the work program. I don't think anybody around this council table is diminishing the level of work and the significance of integrated catchment management in the work program of the
just
council.
finally, as having been involved in and chaired bylaw hearings, they are not a big deal. There's a lot of work in the background. I appreciate that stuff, but they are not a big deal. But this is absolutely necessary. So I'll close on that. Thank you.
All right, I've got a mover and a seconder. All those in favor?
But I was just going to note, because I thought I was still on the speaking order, that if the staff could just consider the timing of things so that the consultation, if should it happen, is bundled in with something else, hopefully, so it doesn't have that separate quoted 50,000 or so attached to it, where possible. I don't think anybody wants to spend an extra lot of consultation if not necessary.
All right, we have completed this item.
I had the red light on quite a long time ago.
Sorry. You have something to add? I mean, we have passed this motion.
Jennifer's saying, I sit on Stratton Pole, I will want to see strong justification for us putting bylaws in place that are not already there. We're trying to get rid of regulation, not include it. So then, whoever's responsible, I don't want to see council wasting money on things where it's not required. And as Jennifer's already pointed out, there is an example in Bay of Plenty which apparently fits, then I think we should be looking to it.
Thanks.
Thank
I'm
you.
sure that staff will note that and incorporate that into their scoping report.
And just further that, whilst we've got drainage and flood protection, we do have land assets. So
Great.
just note that, please.
This matter, we've closed this matter, so let's move on. All right, so we'll now move on to item 7.1, which is the adoption of the 2023-24 annual report and annual report summary. This is on page 53 of your agenda. And we have Janine and Jane and Clarence. Kia ora.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good morning, councillors. On behalf of the team who've been working on the preparation of these documents, I'm pleased to be able to present the audited annual report and summary annual report to Council for adoption. As is noted in the report, following the completion of the audit process, Council has received an unmodified audit opinion. You have had the opportunity to receive an earlier version of the document through your October meeting. Much of the content is consistent with that, although over the last month there have been just further checks and balances and making sure that all the numbers are consistently reflected. Much of the information that is included in the report has been through a committee or council process, particularly through finance and services around financial and non-financial performance, and the risk and assurance committee in terms of the key accounting estimates and judgments. The report sets out key changes that have been made since those reports were put through that committee process earlier, over the last few months. So, Madam Chair, we've got Clarence, who's our audit director here, whether this is an opportune time for Council to hear from him in relation to both the audit process and the opinion, or happy to take any questions on the report as presented.
Great.
Morning, Madam Chair.
To pull that, I can't tell how close that is. There we go. Thank you, Clarence.
Morning, Madam Chair. Morning, councillors. Yes, it's really good to be here, to be in a position to issue an unmodified and qualified, or better known, clean audit opinion. It's been a bit of a longer process than what we wanted to have. We were all aiming for the 31st of October. So I just wanted to thank Janine and Jane and their teams for working with us to get to this position, to get the clean opinion. There were some technical things that we had to deal with and work through, but we got there in the end. So I just wanted to thank them, public forum, for their, what is the right word? Perseverance. Thank you.
I've got Councillor Smith, then Councillor Dunbar-Smith. Councillor
Two
Smith.
questions, thanks. Thank you for the report. Can you, for the record, explain what the basis of the 13 million surplus from operating was? And secondly, on the 6.04 million available from previous years, what is the actual surplus for the 23-24 year?
So, Madam Chair, that information has been previously provided to Council.
I would like it now, please. Sorry? For the record, I've asked for it to be explained today, please.
Madam Chair, I'd have to go back through the information that we had provided to the last committee. A lot of the variance was actually in relation to revenue, including our investment fund performance, plus additional grant revenue that we had received in relation to shovel-ready programs. that funding all then moves through reserves, which is why the net operating position is different or less than, the change in retained earnings is different to the change in financial performance or the net surplus or deficit as is reported. In terms of the surplus, that is noted on page 55 of the agenda, that there were unallocated surplus funds from previous financial years of 329,000. The surplus from 23-24 was 5.7 million. That funding has again been reported previously through both Finance and Services Committee and Council, and we will be coming back as we're starting to work on the 25-26 annual plan with some potential use for that, but that remains at Council's discretion.
Thank you. So, yep, that's fine. Thank you.
Councillor Dunbar-Smith.
Just page 132. We've got a higher rates penalty income of 1.5 million. Is that an indication that tougher conditions for people, that they're struggling to pay and they're paying a penalty rather than paying the rates on time? And then also, why we've got a lower rates remission grant, given that's a tight economic circumstance?
Through the Chair, if I deal with the second one first, Council has a range of rates remission and postponement policies, so remissions are only granted in line with that. I think we have still seen an increasing trend in the number of remissions granted, and actually this year, for example, the hardship remission, we are seeing greater uptake of that, obviously through better knowledge of the availability of that remission. In terms of the rates penalty income, a couple of things there. Probably a tightening in the application of remission of the rates penalties that are applied. So where a ratepayer has had one issue of non-payment, then we will remit a current penalty. But we're not looking back over past penalties probably to the same extent as we have previously. All the penalties are set in line with the provisions of Local Government Rating Act and our own policy. I think our collection is still has held at the same level.
Good, but it's an indication of toughening economic circumstances, or people just being tardy on paying?
People being tardy on paying, I would say. We do obviously offer as much flexibility as we can in helping people to spread that payment, and that will be part of the conversation with ratepayers who are being penalised. How can we set this up in a way that perhaps makes life a little bit easier for you and you avoid any future penalty?
Councillor Marr.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A couple of things, Tracy. How many tonnes of greenhouse gases do we use in producing this? Because we seem to note it. Exactly my point. I'm wondering why we note it. So, but what does concern me about this report is just some of the statistics we use about customer satisfaction. It seems to me a little bit strange that 31% of our buses didn't arrive on time, but more than 91% of our customers we surveyed are happy. It just doesn't seem to read right. I'm just wondering the sample proportion that we take out of all the customers that travel, it's the rail's a little bit the same.
Can I just clarify
the
that?
measures are
Just survey samples or how we structure
Strange
that.
or
Probably a bit of both.
Councillor Strange?
Yeah, so the bus measures, if a bus arrives early or late, then it's measured as not on time. Also, there's a timing measure as well. So when we have roadworks and lack of bus priority as well within Hamilton, then the bus gets caught up in the same congestion as everyone else. So moving forward, those targets are looking to change to reflect actual experience within Hamilton on one hand, is a completely different experience to, say, our regional buses that come in are travelling many, many kilometres to have the same measures is a little bit ridiculous. So, yeah, we have changed them moving forward.
Phil, Director King, did you want to add anything?
I'll just add to that the customer satisfaction surveys that we undertake for both bus and rail align with and are a requirement of NZTA as a primary funder, and they are undertaken using a format that they require us to follow in terms of the number of people who are asked and how the surveys are undertaken. So those reports are presented straight into the annual plan annually.
So from my knowledge, the number of people you would survey would be relative to the number of people that take the service. Must be a percentage.
There has to be a representative sample, and that number is set by NZTA. So I don't know the exact numbers for bus or rail, but I think it's many hundred for both. They're quite a widespread survey, undertaken face to face and online.
Thank you.
Oh, yes.
I just had one other question about the healthy economy part. There's no mention there of the funding that the development fund put into, for example, the Kopu or Sugarloaf wharves. Is that something that would normally be recorded here? We've got a lot of shovel-ready projects, but almost largely agriculturally linked.
Sorry, Madam Chair, I'm just trying to think if we've actually made that payment yet. I think we're still waiting for final claims to actually come through for that. So
okay.
That might, let's look and see. I'm pretty sure we're still waiting on the final,
right.
And we've agreed to an interim payment for them. That's to be made, and then there will be a final, so we can possibly pick that up in the next report.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. If there's no further questions, we've got a mover in Councillor Hughes, and a second in Councillor Downard. All those in favour? Opposed? Carried. Thank you very much. Well done, everyone. I appreciate your perseverance as well, and yours too, Clarence. Thank you for and thank you for an unmodified, fabulous, great outcome. Well done, everyone. Okay, I think we'll move forward because I don't believe our external visitors are here yet. Okay. Great. All right, so we'll jump forward to item 7.3, which is our health and safety report for October 2024. This is on page 360 or 326. And we have Stu Brown. Got us, Stu.
Good morning, councillors. Take the report as read and take you through a few key areas of interest. You'll see the unfortunate event there with the truck driver that was sentenced and the relation that we have to operating vehicles within WRC and the mitigations that we have in place to deal with such incidents. As we move through, you'll see that our utilisation rate for EAP is at 16.2. So that's beyond the 15% top. The 7 to 15 is the recommended parameter, but we have implemented the Rongo Mari process here to have staff engage in that. I've had some really positive feedback directly on that. A couple of staff members have actually come and spoken to me and said how good it is and how appreciative they are of that. That is the first time that anybody has actually engaged me directly on EAP, so it's really positive that's having a good impact in the organisation, and we're glad that we have it. I thought I would reference the events by category and point 14 there. There was a couple of things worth noting. The InReach Guardian, so we obviously have our InReach devices that the staff use when they're out in the field. We've had an issue that's been ongoing for quite some time now with the device going into standby mode after 30 minutes of sitting stationary. So that can happen when staff have lunch and set their jacket down with the InReach device and it doesn't move, it automatically goes into standby. And then it can take up to 20 minutes to reboot again beyond, after they've had lunch and start to move again. So there's some of the check-ins have been missed and that's been causing some issue for us. We engaged with Guardian and they didn't have a solution for us. we have just appointed a new health and safety business partner, and he is fairly tech savvy and has got into the back end of the InReach devices and figured out how to override that and set that standby to 4 hours. So we were pleased that we were actually able to go back and advise Guardian, who do the monitoring of that device, that we've a fix for them, and they were quite appreciative. And obviously it's now reducing the incidents that we're seeing in the space, so that was really good. And we mentioned at the last meeting the head injuries and bangs to the head that had been happening, and you'll see that there was another one in there around a bruise and hit to the back of a head on a beam. That was another just really unusual event. You'll note when you walk into the basement and you get into the lift, there's rather significant steel bracing that comes down on an angle. Somebody was just setting down a box and stood up and banged their head, which is just another really unusual incident again, but I just thought I would note it because we have been seeing these come through over the months. But again, nothing systemic there. As we move through into the leadership walkarounds, it was just to note really that 2 of them hadn't come through. Chris has done 2 in this period, but unfortunately with the app and the reporting through Dempster, that will come. It hadn't been loaded in time for this report, but will show in the next one. And you'll see that myself and Phil have been out there. I thought I would just take a moment to discuss that with you. My experience was extremely positive. Got out down into the farms around the area. That was extremely professionally done by the member of staff that took me out. There was pre-engagement with the farmer the week before. There was a check-in the night before to arrive, and then there was a call to the farmer again when we arrived on site. So there was no surprises, excellent engagement, and the staff member was really competent and thorough around the safety, using the side-by-side, offloading the side-by-side from the trailer. Was very complimentary about the 4x4 training that's provided by Waikato Regional Council, and just an all-round excellent experience. And we had lots of discussion in the car just around the pressures that farmers face out there and the awareness that our staff have around those pressures and the importance of taking time to engage with the farmers when we're out doing our work. So I just thought I would share that really positive experience with you. In the last council meeting, the bow tie was discussed. Councillor Strange, you asked at the time, do we use this anywhere else in the organisation? And I wasn't aware that we did. Since then, we've talked at ELT, and I'm glad to report that Tracy May and SPY team do use the bow tie in that area of the organisation. And obviously, we do use it in health and safety. And we've just been quite explicit about the areas that we use that. And we have included some information on the bow tie in the report for you to review and consider. Marie Fullerton, the health and safety team leader, would be happy to run a short session on the bow tie and give some pragmatic examples of how it's implemented and used. If anybody would like to, we can do that after the meeting or organise another time for you to look at that. I believe that's all I have to note. Happy to take any questions.
Councillor Marr.
Yeah, thanks for your report, Stu. Comprehensive as usual. Hey, just a quick question, probably outside your report, but do you have any comment around the Ports of Auckland decision just recently and the finding of the CE in that space?
Yeah, that's gone through.
Quite news.
It is. Yeah, it's pretty topical, and I guess that coming through is quite significant. And that really comes back to if you're going to fail, you fail safely. So that's why we have the things like the bow tie, that we go and we do that deep root cause analysis, and we can find all of the aspects of that. And whenever things do go wrong, they go wrong as safely as we possibly can manage.
There was, I know there has been some talk in the media around governance and the responsibility in that space on an accident, in that space.
Yeah.
My understanding is we are one step isolated from it. But.
And I guess that's the aspect of having this come to you, that we keep you abreast of everything that's going on and any issues that we see or themes that are coming out there, that we engage with you and ensure that you're across that. And the same with the executive. It's really important that we have that monthly reporting that comes to them and they're across it. And so any issues that do arise aren't a shock, and that there's engagement at that governance level. So it's a pretty key point.
Yeah, so you go through the WorkSafe report that comes out for an incident like that?
Yep. Thank you.
Mr. CE, did you want to comment on that?
Thank you, Councillor Na. I mean, I'd have to say that decision doesn't make me feel any more comfortable. And, you know, clearly it's an indication of where the responsibilities lying. In bigger organisations with a lot of staff members, where you've got different tiers of management, it has indicated where responsibility still lies and falls. And I think that there'll be a lot of discussion in terms of those types of organisations that inherently are high risk by their very nature. And I'd have to say that we have some parts of our business which are, you know, could be of higher risk as well. And we will just continue, I think, to have a look at our risks, review them using, you know, some of these tools and making sure we're doing all we can, because that's all I can try and put in place. And I guess that what I would need going forward is the confidence of council that we do have the right systems in place and we're doing all we can.
Any other questions from councillors? Yeah. I do think that is just going back to what you've raised there, and that's that decision. I do think it is interesting to note how layering up of these decisions creates outcomes. Many of them very positive, because we do focus on ensuring that everybody gets home safe. But I also think that there are other outcomes when people are personally liable in terms of appetite to take on that risk, whether that's appetite to take on that risk as an executive or as a professional board member. You know, as you point out, Councillor Marr, we are, as councillors, removed from that. But if you're a professional board member, you are not. And so when we look at things like, I will not, I was going to start talking about traffic cones, but I will stop myself. But these things have consequences, eh? And like I say, many of them are very good and very well intentioned, but there are always other types of outcomes. Thank you very much, Stu. If there's no other questions, wait a minute, did I put it? No, I need a seconder. Councillor Dunbar-Smith. All those in favour? Opposed? Carried. Fantastic. Thank you very much, Stu. All right, and we have Vaughn in the chamber. Vaughn Payne. Yes, so now, councillors, we're moving back to item 7.2. This is on page 267. Have I got the right number there? Yes. 267. Yes. Of your agenda packs. This is an update on Waikato Water Done Well. Did you want to open us up?
If I could just make some opening remarks. And so, council, you may recall probably last time that Vaughan came and spoke to you about kind of what the go forward was with developing heads of agreement. A huge amount of work has been done, led by Vaughan and others, into developing a heads of agreement. All the chief executives in the region from councils, except for Hamilton City, were part of the development of that heads of agreement. Myself and on occasions Brent Sinclair have been involved, and councils, as we'll talk to, are being asked to make decisions going forward. Now that doesn't apply to us because we don't have infrastructural assets that are proposed to be transferred into into a CCO that gets developed for the purposes in which it's been developed at present. So, on that, I'll go over to Vaughan.
Welcome, Vaughan.
Kia ora, Madam Chair, tēnā tātou katoa. Thank you for the opportunity to update the Regional Council on where we've got to with heads of agreement to form a water CCO in the Waikato on a voluntary basis. So we've been working with 10 councils, including the Regional Council, to develop this heads of agreement. Can I just start off by thanking the Regional Council for its leadership. You've been quite unique in relation to regional councils. You've seen the strategic need to improve water services and to support our TAs to arrive at a good place. So I think it's really important to just circle back to you to let you know where we've got to. I'm not sure how to drive the slides. Oh yes, thanks Dave. Thank you. Next slide, thank you. So I'll just recap on where we got to, or how we've got to this point. I think I've only got about 20 minutes. Is that right? Yep. So it'll be a bit of a quick tour. Talk about the heads of agreement, the strategic reasons to sign up to the heads of agreement, and this is obviously aimed at the local authorities, the territorial authorities, and then look at where we're heading to. Thanks, Dave. So in terms of background, the Minister's made it quite clear that while there's lots of options available for councils to improve water services delivery, there's a strong expectation that councils will look regionally, that those who have looked regionally will be looked favourably in terms of regional deals, and that regional collaboration is not just an option, it's a practical necessity. So again, reinforcing your role because you understand the benefits of a regional approach that's helped our TAs get to the right place in this heads of agreement. Thank you, Dave. A reminder of what we're trying to achieve by working together. So this is the vision that every council has adopted in principle. Te mana o te wai, te mana o te tangata, healthy water, healthy people. Thanks, Dave. And the strategic outcomes being financial sustainability, improving security for our workforce, both staff and suppliers, being focused on customers and helping to use technology to get people to value water more. Recognising that it's not all about scale. We need to make sure that we're not setting up a CCO that runs off into the sunset and there's no accountability back to local councils and shareholders. And lastly, there's big expectations in terms of improving water services, including delivering on treaty settlement outcomes, public health and environmental outcomes. So it's got to deliver on those expectations. So those are the big outcomes that we have used to design what we've designed. Thank you, Dave. So context, this has been an 18-month journey of not just the mayors and regional council chair, but also the iwi chairs of the Waikato came together 18 months ago and asked themselves the question, do we want a Waikato solution to water services, or do we just want to sit back and let the government decide what's best for us? And the decision was to be proactive and co-design a solution that best suited the Waikato to deliver on those strategic outcomes I've mentioned while addressing local concerns, or what we've called showstoppers. And what we've co-designed, what we've negotiated, and I want to acknowledge all the chief executives meeting at 7:30 every Wednesday for the last 2 months for an hour and a half. It's been a big commitment. What we've come up with is probably 80% there. It's got to go through a public consultation process. It's going to be improved in terms of a model. And so you've got an opportunity to help refine and improve, perhaps through that process if you felt like you wanted to. Thank you, Dave. Why do we need a heads of agreement? So by law, councils, they need to come up with a water services delivery plan by September next year that does two things. Firstly, defines what their delivery model is, and secondly, how they're going to improve and invest more in terms of better water services outcomes, or Three Waters outcomes. They've got a number of delivery options, 5. The heads of agreement is one of those options. Each council needs to consult on a delivery model and to consult on a minimum of 2 options. This heads of agreement gives them one option to compare against existing arrangements. Thank you, Dave. This is the detail of the heads of agreement. I think it's in your papers, so I won't go into it too much, but we can come back to this in questions if you'd like. Thank you, Dave. This is the model, and it's indicative. It's a DIA diagram, but you've got your councils who become shareholders, and each council's got in the heads of agreement a representative that goes on to a shareholder forum. In this diagram, it's called a shareholder council. That shareholder council enables the shareholders to make decisions together in terms of appointing the board, signing off on a statement of expectations, monitoring the performance of the board, those sorts of things that you expect to see in a water company. Thank you, Dave. Again, detail that's in your pack, but we are talking about a limited liability company whose purpose relates to achieving that vision and the strategic direction, those strategic outcomes I've mentioned. It's owned by councils as shareholders. The main value of a share is influence, because the shares can't be sold, they can't be transferred, there's no dividend, and so on. Thank you, Dave. Most councils that we're talking to that have signed up to, are looking at signing up to the heads of agreement, are looking at going straight to stage 2. So stage 1 was receiving particular services like capital works and asset management. Stage 2 is about like a water care model, a full Monty approach. And a number of councils have decided, are starting to decide that actually we just want to go to the full entity. We've had 4 councils formally resolve to sign up so far, that those being Waitomo, Waipa, Matamata Piako, and South Waikato. So we've got another 5 councils that have yet to formally consider the heads of agreement, but all 4 so far have decided to go straight to stage 2, and it's still subject to public consultation. I've talked about the importance of the shareholder forum. Thank you, Dave. Statement of expectations, there's going to be mandatory requirements in those statement of expectations and optional. One of the mandatory requirements is about giving effect to treaty settlement obligations, which I think in the context of the regional council is important in terms of the river settlement, what's coming in terms of the Hauraki settlement, and so on. So any obligations of councils in terms of those settlements will be passed on to the CCO as they're relevant to managing water services. By law, the directors or the board needs to be a competency-based board. Can't have elected members or staff members, not to say that elected members or staff members aren't competent. Thank you, Dave. I thought I'd better say that. Partnering with iwi is also built into the heads of agreement. It's quite challenging for iwi to know how much to commit to this model when they don't know whether their councils are fully committing themselves. And so once we know which councils are formally deciding to become shareholders post-public consultation, then the shareholder forum can start to talk to the iwi chairs to go, look, what's a partnership model look like? What's your role in terms of getting some assurances that we've got the right competencies on the board in terms of te ao Māori, tikanga Māori, and so on. Over and above what might be in the statement of expectations relating to partnerships as well for the CCO. Transition planning, really important to make sure that at the end of the day we look after staff, that any revenue that councils are gathering for providing water services ends up in the right place. Making sure that customers are looked after on that journey as well. So we plan to start transition planning as soon as possible, because we've got to make sure that this is a successful transition from councils to the CCO. Thank you, Dave. I won't go into this. I'll keep going. Thank you, Dave. Again, I think this is in your pack. We put a lot of effort to identify local concerns and showstoppers and to make sure that we built into the design of the CCO issues like local voice and influence, making sure that those gnarly issues like price harmonisation or cross-subsidisation and prioritisation of investment, there was a pathway to address all those. And in short, those gnarly issues we are leaving for the board to address with the shareholders as opposed to trying to solve the problem now. Thank you, Dave. So in summary, the strategic case to sign up to this model, thank you, Dave. Firstly is scale. So as Chris said, Hamilton City Council isn't in the model. They've decided to take their own pathway to set up a CCO, but we all agree that we still need one CCO for the region at some point. But they do, as you probably know, have some particular challenges that are unique to Hamilton. So notwithstanding Hamilton, in the model to date, we're looking at 64% of the region's population. All councils have growth that's higher than the national average of 2% over the last 5 years. If we're looking at a shareholding that's based on number of connections, because that's mostly related to a customer view, and for a number of districts, there's large proportions of the population that don't receive water services. So it comprises 65% of the number of wastewater and water connections in the region, and 70% of the revenue that's collected. Thank you, Dave. Another few reasons for signing up is aligning with the government's expectations of a regional approach. It maintains the momentum, the trust, the goodwill that we've developed over the last 18 months. We've got mechanisms that protect local voice while enhancing local capacity and capability. On the issue of, hey, there's lots of uncertainty in this space, well, make a decision, sign up and solve uncertainty and move forward. Scale to achieve a whole of river approach, and this I think is really important to the Regional Council. By having all of the wastewater treatment plants, all the water takes in a river catchment, you can be more strategic on what's the best return on investment for capital works to deliver good outcomes for the river, as opposed to a district by district or plant by plant approach that occurs at the moment. We've got the scale to address affordability issues. And lastly, we're walking the talk in terms of regional collaboration. Thank you, Dave. This reinforces the shift that we're trying to take from a district approach to a catchment approach. Thank you, Dave. And you may or may not be interested on milestones and off-ramps. I might stop it there, Madam Chair, because we're starting to get into stuff that might be more TA specific.
TA specific, exactly. And just to clarify this for councillors, you're sharing this just to keep us informed of this conversation that is happening with the TAs. And while we have been a part of it and we agreed to support it, and I totally endorse it in terms of showing regional leadership and working collaboratively with our TA partners, we will have no assets going into this. And so therefore we will not be signing this heads of agreement.
That's right.
I just want councillors to be very clear what we're, that this is, that we don't need to debate that.
No.
That there are no assets of ours that are going into this.
But the heads of agreement does mention the Regional Council, firstly, to acknowledge your leadership in the process, being part of the process. But secondly, that in terms of a catchment approach and those sorts of things, there are opportunities for further discussions.
Nice. All right. I do have, I see a hand up online with Councillor Graff.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Hello, Vaughan. Thank you for your
Hello.
presentation.
Thank you.
Look, I might have missed the bit where it mentioned how the board's populated. Like, is it a selection process appointed? How's independence ensured?
Yep. Thank you.
Thanks.
Yes. So in the heads of agreement, we've identified competencies that we believe are important for the board. It's a Schedule 7 to the heads of agreement. And so the board appointment process will be managed by a recruitment agency. I think the process is that the chair is elected or appointed first by the shareholders with the support of that. So it'll be through the shareholder forum, made up of every council mayor as a default. So the recruitment agency would support the shareholder forum to appoint the board chair, and the board chair would work with the shareholders to appoint the rest of the board, satisfying the competencies that are agreed in the heads of agreement.
So that, just so you can see it, Councillor Graff, that board skill and competency schedule is on page 323 in your agenda. If you
Thank you very much. Thanks.
Councillor Marr.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, thank you for your presentation, Vaughan. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounded to me like that of the 4 councils that have indicated that they would sign this heads of agreement, they can only consult on one other option with their communities alongside yours?
Yeah, so the legislation says that you only need to consult on one option, your preferred option, but you've got to make at least the analysis of a second option available to the public. So you only need to consult on one, which may not be Waikato Water Done Well, it might be standalone, but they need Waikato Water Done Well or some other option as an alternative so the public can see how that stacks up or how the 2 options stack up.
So legislation then, so in theory, a minimum of 2.
That's right.
Regardless.
That's right.
Yeah, and possibly up to the 5.
Yeah, you can have as many options as you want, but you need a minimum of 2 available to support public consultation.
Thanks, Vaughan.
And in terms of that, sorry, I'm just on the back of the consultation question. I was recently hearing from another council that was talking about the multiple layers of consultation required to progress this in a very short space and time. And so if you get all 9 of the councils that have participated in developing this heads of agreement on board, will they consult with their communities collectively, or will each district be going out essentially perhaps saying the same thing? I'm just wondering what that looks like. We recognize that next March, April, our communities across this region, there is going to be a lot of consultation on a lot of things.
That's right.
And I'm just wondering, how do we make this easier for our constituents, our ratepayers, to understand the question they're being asked to consider?
Yes, so we are encouraging a combined approach. The legislation enables a joint committee to be formed from the councils to make decisions together. And so that's the encouragement that we're making. And I think at our next 7:30 meeting on Wednesday, we'll start to talk about what consultation might look like for those councils that are signing up. Notwithstanding, for their own reasons, a council might decide to consult separately on this option. The critical thing is that we've got the same analysis of this option. Otherwise, the public's going to be totally confused.
Right. And you mentioned the 4 that have already made the decision to sign. The other 5, are there dates scheduled for their councils to consider?
Yes.
It's not that any of those remaining 5 have said no.
No,
Right.
so we've got 100% approval so far because only 4 councils have formally considered it.
Okay.
the last council considering this formally is Hauraki on the 18th of December.
Councillor Dunbar-Smith.
Yes, so just in terms of the milestones off and on, we're obviously a regulator, so we're not moving forward to the next stage. There is another regulator in this mix called Taumata Arawai. I don't know if you can answer this, but I've had some feedback from some councillors in the districts saying that a lot of their rates increases, which are very high, are due to much higher specifications than they used to have in terms of what they have to provide for water and wastewater. Is there any way that this CCO can lobby or influence the standard setting if it's deemed too high?
There's always possibilities. I think that we've got to walk before we can run and make sure that, for me, it's a positive, constructive relationship with every regulator with it, because there'll be economic regulation, there's going to be environmental regulation, there's going to be taumata arawai as well in terms of public health, and it's for me, the opportunity is a more strategic approach to regulation and compliance, which is what we've been talking about with the regional council. Is at the moment, council, I think what's driving a lot of our costs, if you think about wastewater treatment plants, there's a big component of capital works. And it's certainly not an issue for the regional council, but the traditional approach has been a council looks at their wastewater treatment plant in isolation of what's going on in the rest of the river. And so we worked well with the regional council and the River Authority and the iwi partners to go, actually, if we really want to make a difference to the river, what is the best return on investment for every dollar? We might one day get to the point where we decide actually it might be better to invest upstream for this wastewater treatment plant rather than at the end of the pipe. Or secondly, hey, what if a component of the proposed investment went into supporting land use improvements that aligned with, say, the River Authority strategy, and we end up with a partnership between urban and rural in terms of overall river health? Yeah. I think that's the real opportunity, is not so much lobbying on standards which drive us to a pipe solution, but a strategy that drives us to a whole of catchment solution. That's the big gain, I think, from this model.
Through you, Madam Chair, if I could just add to that. So the government is looking at standards, wastewater, stormwater, and so on, which they might bring in, which is to try and simplify processes and so on. That has its own set of complications, actually, how that all works. It's not as simple as just straight up that we're going to make the infrastructure network or what comes out the end of the pipe easier, for people to comply with. There's work to go in that space. But the key thing, I think, that directly relates to your question is the government's currently consulting or about to consult on levying through local government to be able to pay for the services of Taumata Arawai and the new Commerce Commission. So that's something that doesn't exist, that local government has to charge for, but that's what the government is currently consulting and bringing in. Have I got this right, Vaughan? New additional charges than what people would normally see?
And you can expect 9 councils trying to cope with economic regulation and the costs involved versus going, hey, let's do this together and let's share the costs. I think the costs will be a lot lower for the ratepayers from a combined approach as opposed to an individual approach.
But a new rate on the way.
Yes.
A levy required of local councils from central government. I think I actually just got a letter yesterday around it.
Madam Chair, can I remind Council of the example of Matamata Piako around the catchment approach? So 5 wastewater treatment plants instead of having 5 different consent applications, they combine them into one. Even though some consents expired in 10 years' time, they decided to get them to all have a common expiry date and get them considered together. They had a $6 million budget. They spent $2 million the consent, so a $4 million saving on consent processing, and they expect a $20 million saving on capital works because they're looking at nutrient balancing between the plants to get the best return on investment for the Firth of Thames, as opposed to a plant-by-plant investment. And that's, again, a good outcome, working well with the regulator to achieve that. And that's one council, let alone 9 councils working smarter in this space. Some real opportunities to save costs for ratepayers.
Councillor Kneebone.
Thanks, Vaughan. Just FYI, I just read an article in the Waitomo News this morning that says that Waikato District and Hamilton City are doing their own thing. Yeah.
I think that Waikato District Council, well, I know Waikato District Council, they're part of our negotiations. They've negotiated the heads of agreement. They've also been negotiating with Hamilton City Council. So they've got 2 options on the table, not just one.
Just I was reading through it last night. The concept of price harmonisation seems an integral part of this, particularly given the conversation you just had now, re Ben's question. But it also seems to have some challenges too in terms of the issue of individual council spatial plans and associated settlement patterns and how that could impact on an individual council's cost of compliance, particularly some of the ones, as you say, with multiple plants around them as well. So I imagine they're going to be quite challenging conversations.
Yeah, which reinforces in price harmonisation what's the principles that we want to drive that conversation, and that's built into the heads of agreement. I think secondly, to note that there's no obligation to harmonise pricing, that it is voluntary, and it's best led by the board with the shareholders, because there will be winners and losers in a cross-subsidisation scenario. If you've got a council that's got quite low rates and another one with high rates, well, you know which one's going to come down and which one's going to go up. So it might be that the small community goes, well, actually, we want to ring fence our costs. But the cost of ring fencing is that when they've got a big capital works program, a new wastewater treatment plant that needs renewing at some point in the future, they don't have the benefit of the wider family to help pay for that. So there's pros and cons of price harmonisation. It is quite gnarly, and we've said, hey, this is a leadership opportunity for the board and the shareholders to work through.
No, I think that's a good way to put it, because to me it won't work if we can't all work together.
I like that. Hard conversations. We'll just call them leadership opportunities from now on. Yes.
If I could just make a comment about the first part of your question, Councillor Kneebone, and that's the fact that there's another CCO under development. And there was some discussion about that between councillors at the Hamilton City WRC joint hui the other day. And so there is an aspiration that there will be maybe some regional unity in terms of one place in the future, and Vaughan, that there's some structural arrangements being put in place for in this heads of agreement for a CCO to join another CCO. What I don't have visibility of is what's happening in the Hamilton City space. And are they doing a parallel type of structural arrangement? Are there rule structures in terms of shareholdings and how things would work in the future happening in a similar space, so that there's greater chance of that occurring or not? And Vaughan, I don't know if you've got any insights.
Only that there is a desire to have one CCO in future, and we've got some discussions coming up with Hamilton City to look at what, I think that the key thing is, what are the critical decisions that are going to have to be made that you actually want to make those decisions together. Might be procurement of IT systems or whatever it is. And if you look at Tas Water, that brought 29 councils into one CCO. Before there was a intermediary step where they went to 4 CCOs. Those 4 CCOs had the same chair. That same chair drove them to one CCO. So I think for me, I'd like the same board chair of both CCOs to help facilitate that coming together. I think that for those of us who, well, I'm assuming all of us recognise that for the Waikato to be strong, all parts of the Waikato need to be strong, big and small councils. If we don't have that a regional CCO that does get up and running, we're going to end up with small councils who are quite vulnerable and not have any negotiating leverage when we try to form one CCO. So having 2 CCOs isn't a bad thing, and it's going to give everyone the ability to negotiate from a position of strength when we bring the 2 CCOs together. And so it's a matter of making sure that both models succeed.
Just going to say thank you. So far, I just really appreciate the work that you and others have done so far to get to this point. It's quite amazing to see the journey unfold.
Yeah, thanks, Jennifer. And it does, DIA are looking at us, they're going, no one out. You guys are well ahead of the rest of the country in terms of being collaborative. And so again, reinforce and acknowledge the role of the regional council in the space as well, because you being at the table has made a big difference.
And I do think it is really important. This has been an important process for the region as a whole, because whether we're talking about water services, whether we're talking about economic development, whether we're talking about bringing a regional deal together and a collective voice for this region, all of that takes practice, getting comfortable, working in that space. And so I'm really pleased that we have done that, that the Waikato has participated in this, and I'm really pleased with the position this council chose to take. We didn't need to. We were unique in that approach. I think that is leadership, and it signals to others throughout this region that this region can and does work collaboratively and collectively and for the common good. So I'm really pleased. But as also I noted, we are not going to be signing this heads of agreements. None of our assets are going into this. But I do take your point around our role as a regulator and being able to work with a single entity, or maybe 2, depending on how she goes, how that might enable us to get better outcomes for fresh water across this region.
Thank you. Madam Chair, if there's no more questions, can I make a cheeky request? And that is...
Maybe.
that is, I do think you have the opportunity to encourage momentum and maintain momentum in what has been invested in for the last 18 months. So if you felt inclined to make any public statements that were encouraging of the work that you can see and encouraging of our councils to continue to maintain momentum, that would be useful.
Nice. I
think it's a great idea.
I do think as well as being encouraging of that, as we do know, Hamilton City is following their own path. Part of that encouragement, from my point of view, would be that there is communication as these are being developed, so that as Mayor Paula often talks about, that we're all building with Lego and not somebody building with Meccano and somebody building with Lego. That and the onus is on both groups that are progressing these conversations. The onus is on them to come together and willingly and in good faith share their thinking, so that there is opportunities down the line and we don't run into, you know, these parts don't fit together. So.
One last question.
Councillor Dunbar-Smith.
September 2025 is the government's cutoff. What happens if our councils in this region don't agree by that stage? And what happens to the rest of the country if they're further behind? What's the time frame looking like? And what's the penalty for missing that?
So what the government's, they've created a mechanism where they can put in a Crown, I think it's a facilitator, Crown interventionist.
You're just making up words now.
Basically, if they don't believe that the water services delivery plan is resulting in something that's financially sustainable, then they will force a solution, or they can force a solution. And so this is about us coming up with a solution on a voluntary basis versus being told what to do. And I think the rest of the country, I think from the minister's speech last week, and the message is about the importance of or his expectations of a regional approach, and the linking that to regional deals has made some parts of the country sit up and go, we better get serious about this.
Yeah, his intent was clear.
Yeah, so
as it always is with
so
Minister Brown.
Waikato's well placed, but I do feel for some other regions who haven't been able to be as collaborative.
Do you want to wrap this up? Did you want to final?
I was only just going to say I really like the cheeky suggestion. And so I had just scribbled a few words if we did want to pass a resolution that I could move if I wanted to consider it. But yeah, happy to be led by yourself, Chair Pamela.
I think we've had a good discussion here. We will consider the cheeky request.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Fawn. I really do appreciate the work that you have put in to this. I know that it is not always easy to herd the cats, as it were. So thank you very much for your continued endeavor. All right. Do we have a motion to leave this report? Here we go. Moved by Councillor Downard, seconded by Councillor Kneebone. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. All right. Councillors, how are we feeling? Can we power on? Huh? 5 minutes? All right. 5-minute break. So we will adjourn the meeting at 10:59. We will reconvene at 11:05. started again. So we will reconvene the meeting at 11:09. We have 2 items remaining, one more in public, and then we will go into public excluded. So we are now on item 7.4 of the agenda. This is on page 334. Item 7.4, incorporating National Policy Statement for Freshwater Management 2020 and Resource Management Amendment Act 2024, Section 55, changes into the Waikato Regional Plan. And the title alone. All right, and we have Bruce. Bruce, did you want to speak to this?
Very briefly, thank you. Morning, councillors. Yeah, this is giving effect to changes to the MPSFM from 2022 and a very recent change from 2024 to mandatory changes that we're required to make to the natural inlands policy in the MPSFM. Changes are made under section 55, which simply directs us that we make the changes into our plan directly without recourse to the Schedule 1 process. That can be done very straightforward and notify it as soon as possible after the changes have been approved. So we've got all that lined up in the meantime. And the changes will actually bring the regional plan into line with the MPSFM, which will make things much more efficient for our consenting people in particular, and give applicants and our own consent people much more certainty in implementing policy. At the moment, there's a disconnect which is creating some uncertainty for to us and said, well, we need to make these changes and part of what we're doing.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's compulsory. It's has to be done. So let's get on with it. I so move.
Happy to second.
So we've got a mover and a seconder. Councillor Dunbar Smith.
Yeah, I just wanted to know, what is the definition of a natural wetland? Because I mean, it's relevant because I mean, when you're talking about streams, there's a kind of gumboot test if you can walk across it, and you know, there's dimensions set out. Are there dimensions or sizes or the amount of wetness?
Yes, there are in the MPSFM, and it's down to quite a fine level. I think it's 50 square metres it goes down to. And there's a definition which has been debated around the tracks ever since the MPSF has come into being, and there's been a couple of changes to it. I can't tell you what it is off the top of my head, my apologies, but I'd have to look at that and come back to you.
So I noticed there's no definition attached to what we're putting into our document.
But there is in the MPSFM, yeah.
Okay, so that will apply.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, I've got a mover and a seconder. Any other questions? Nope. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you, Bruce. Took longer for me to read out the title of that paper, didn't it? For us to get through it. Okay, we will now move into public excluded for our next item. Do I have a
Madam Chair, I'd like to challenge the need to move into public excluded. My understanding is the reasons behind it is because it is a CE KPI, but as those are all public, I don't see the need for us to be discussing this in public excluded.
Public? I don't believe they are. CE KPIs have always been a minute, we're just gonna, let me just close the meeting. We just gotta do the, so we haven't closed the meeting yet. Are we good to go? All right, thank you very much, councillors, for your attendance today. Thank you, staff, for preparing reports that help us in our decision-making. I appreciate how everybody has engaged and contributed, including those online. Thank you very much for that. So with that, we will close with a karakia.
Yeah, thank you, councillors. Unahia, unahia, unahia mai te uru tapanui, kia wātia, kia mama, ki nākau, te tinana, te hinenaro, e te ara takatu, ko rā e rongo, e whakaaria aki ki runga, kia tina, haumia, huiei, tai kia.
All right, we'll declare the meeting closed at 11:59 a.m. Kia ora, everyone.